What is up, everybody? Ethan Newberry, the Ginger Runner, here for another Ginger Runner Live. This is episode number 53, and tonight I have one of those guests that is kind of a legend in the sport, in ultra running and in running in general. He's done some incredible things over the last few years alone. Just to give you an example, he was first at Rocky Raccoon just a couple of weeks ago. He's been first at Rocky Raccoon before. He's normally a podium finisher in any race that he competes in, which is pretty amazing. And also this year alone, he's also first place at Crystal Springs 50K, which is pretty amazing. Third at Leadville in 2014, first at Leadville in 2013, sixth at Western States in 2014, and he was fourth at Western States in 2013. And currently holds the record of the Grand Slam of ultra running. That's just like a little bit of his resume. You can go to the ultra sign up and just look at his race calendar over the last few years, and then your mouth just let it fall agape. It is Ian Sharman. He's an incredible ultra runner, an incredible coach, and he's also the director of the U.S. Skyrunning series. I can't wait to talk to him a bit about that. If you have any questions for Ian, if you're watching live, jump into the chat room, let us know, because I will relay those questions to him. It's going to be a good show, and I can't wait to talk to Ian. Welcome to Ginger Runner Live. Ginger Runner. Yes, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the show. This is going to be a good one. This is one of those guests that I've been looking forward to getting for a very long time. I was very lucky that one of you viewers tweeted Ian and included me in the tweet, and it was kind of this like, oh yes, I got to get Ian, and Ian's like, yeah, I'm totally on board, and it turned into this get the guest because he's an incredible ultra runner, an incredible coach. He's also the director of the U.S. Skyrunning series. I can't wait to pick his brain on all things ultra and endurance, and maybe get some tips on my training for the year, running my first 100. He's run many of them and won many of them. And I know a lot of you are maybe doing your first ultra or have lots of questions for someone like Ian, especially being at the level that he is at. So I'm very, very excited to introduce him. Ian Sharman, what's up, buddy? Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Well, you're so kind. Thank you, and thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, of course. I guess first things first, we had Ellie Greenwood on the show a couple of weeks ago, back in December, and she had amazing things to say about you. I know that you two are friends. You both are coaches under the same program, but you are her coach. Am I correct?
Yeah, I coach her as well as having her coach within my business.
It's amazing because she's an incredible athlete, very, very talented, incredibly fast, as are you. What is it like to coach elite athletes? I know that you coach athletes of all levels, but what is it like to coach elite athletes? Is it
it's a different type of experience because it's really fun having someone go through their first 50K or their first whatever it might be or get a PR, and then you've got someone like Ellie who is basically winning everything under the sun, and you know, I feel like I'm vicariously living through her for those races as well, because there are often races that I haven't got a hope of winning, like the Comrades Ultra in South Africa that she won last year. I have no chance of ever getting nearly as good as she is, but I get to kind of have that fun of seeing her win it, which is almost as good. But in some ways it's better, actually, because she does the hard work.
Yeah, right, exactly. There's already a lot of chat in the chat room. I don't mean to already get off topic about. I look like I just woke up. I'm sorry, guys. I actually just got done with the run, so that's why my hair looks the way it does. But Ian is obviously on point. So if you want to take tips of looking attractive, Ian's got that one covered. Now, Ian, tell me a little bit about your running background. I know you've been doing ultras for a number of years now, many, many more years than I have. But when did you kind of kick into endurance running, marathon distance and beyond? What was kind of your start?
Literally 10 years ago, almost to the day.
Hey.
And it was that I was living in London. As you can tell, I'm not a native American here. I was living in London. I'm from the UK, and just was finding that I wasn't really doing much exercise, and I'd always been very active growing up. So if you hear any noises like that little background, that's my dogs. I'll just bring them over. So he's just shaking himself there.
I know our audience loves dogs.
So basically, I was in London, didn't feel like I was doing enough exercise, and saw a TV show about a race in the Sahara Desert, and thought, hey, that looks like an adventure. And so I kind of got into running that way, not because it was running, but because it seemed like the adventure side of it was fun. And then I started doing some marathons, a couple of ultras in the training for that, because that was a a multi-stage race that included several marathons and an ultra, which kind of sounds weird as the first thing that you try, but I had 18 months to build up to it, so it wasn't like I was doing it the following week.
Right.
And then I just got addicted. So really, really enjoyed the races that I was doing. I think I did my first 100 marathons and ultras within about 4 or 5 years of starting.
Wow.
And I've done another 100 or so since then now.
That's incredible. Marathon des Sables, that was pretty much one of your first experiences at a major distance. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, I think I'd done one ultra in the build-up to that. So I did the London to Brighton Run, which doesn't even exist anymore, and I did the final year of that classic race, which had been around for 50-plus years, but it was arranged by a load of guys who got into their 60s, and they basically had to stop doing it because they couldn't find anyone else to take it on. So I was lucky enough that was my first ultra, and it's a classic one that people don't really know about anymore, and that's 10 years ago that it stopped.
Wow. So what was it like then transitioning from that race, something local, something more mainland, to the Marathon des Sables, which is all desert, extremely hot, pretty much one of the most iconic ultras and stage races, and extreme of the sort. What was it like transitioning into that?
Well, the difficult thing as well is they have it over Easter or around that time of year. So going from a wintertime training to going to the extreme heat, it's not the ideal type of training. Also, I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I'd read a couple of books that gave me some vague idea. I'd done about 3 marathons on road, which again, not the best preparation for running in sand in the desert in 120 degrees. So I ended up DNFing in that race. I basically drowned myself in the desert. What I did was I drank too much water, which I didn't even know was a thing at the time. Now I'm fully aware of hyponatremia and being able to water down the bloodstream from basically drinking too much in a race. But I was in the desert. It was really hot. They give you lots of water. I drank it all, and I assumed that was the best thing to do and that there was no upper limit. So after the first day, I actually fainted twice on the start line of day 2. So the first time I stood up that morning, I fainted immediately. And then I was like a turtle because I had my backpack on at this point. Stood up, fainted. I'm just looking up at the sky, wondering where the tent's gone because I was completely out of it. And just thinking, how did the tent disappear and why is the backpack on? And you know, completely oblivious to what had just happened. And then that happened again about an hour later when I'm on the start line. So I muddled through that day, felt absolutely horrible, had all sorts of things going wrong with my body. But I had seen the doctors at the beginning. It's not like I was a complete idiot.
Right.
Not the smartest in that race, but not a complete idiot. And then, unfortunately, I felt so bad by the end of that second day, I had to drop out because I couldn't get any sleep. I couldn't eat anything. Things were going straight through me. And basically, I was quite glad to be out of it because I was going through a horrible amount of things at that point that weren't even related to the running. And then as soon as I got back to the hotel, I pretty much signed up for the next edition that I could get into, which was 2 years later, because I was kind of okay with dropping out because it felt so bad at that point. But then after I saw everyone else with their shiny new medals, I immediately signed up again. So then that was 2006, and then I did it again in 2008. And it went a lot better that time. I'd learned something at least in those couple of years and managed to finish it. I think I was 13th overall. So I had a respectable run there and felt like I'd learned quite a lot from the first time. But it's amazing what the learning curve is like with ultras in general, especially the more extreme ones.
Yeah. Do you ever go back to that particular race and use that as fuel when you're running and having to dig deep? Do you ever go back to that marathon?
Not so much that one. No, I mean there's certainly lots of points within both training and races that I've done that I can use as a kind of reminder of things I've gone through that are generally worse or that I somehow overcame. I think everyone is like that. Every time you overcome a hardship, that makes you mentally tougher for next time because you can always look back at it and go, I've done this before. I know I can do this.
Yeah. I'm currently kind of going through the recovering from injury phase, and I'm telling you, it sucks. Have you ever gone through something similar, like an injury at any point?
In fact, I'm just in the same as you, actually. I just came back about 3 months ago from having a stress fracture on my foot. So, or just a fracture, basically. I was running down Mount Whitney in California, having paced someone at the Badwater Ultra through Death Valley. But I only had road shoes because Badwater's a road race. And I didn't have enough protection, managed to fracture the ball of my right foot. And then I spent about 3 months basically not running, then started again in November last year, and had an abbreviated 3-month build-up to the Rocky Raccoon 100 this year. So very frustrating. I very much sympathize with every runner who gets injured, and one of the things I focus on with coaching is trying to avoid injuries. I mean, prevention is so much better than cure. And also, sometimes it's just simple little things like being able to do maintenance exercises, being aware of if your body's starting to get injured and not just running on it regardless. Right. But no, I very much sympathize with that. But are you almost out of the woods now?
Yeah, I mean, I've been able to get a couple of miles in here and there, and slowly building back up. An ankle sprain is the injury that it was when I don't know why I phrased the sentence that way. The ankle sprain is what it was. So I've been gradually building back up, and any day that it's not painful, I've been grateful for. But then every once in a while, it'll swell back up. So it's definitely a really slow build up, and I'm on week 7 now. What did you do in those months where you weren't able to do anything? Were you able to get on a bike, or were you able to?
I did. I conveniently bought a bike just before. I haven't had a bike for a few years since I lived in London, but yeah, I mean, basically, I just decided I'd have some time off because I felt like I was a bit exhausted. In those 10 years that I've been running, I hadn't really taken much of a break ever. And it was just getting to me a little bit, especially since 2013 I had the Grand Slam, which was 400 milers within a 10-week period. So that kind of wore me down, and I didn't even really rest after that. So I was quite happy to have a bit of time off and just go, okay, well, I'll let it heal. My body probably needs a rest anyway. So the timing was kind of lucky from that perspective. But yeah, I did some cycling. I did a lot of walking when I could until I realized that that wasn't even helping it. Then I went on crutches. And didn't do either of those things. But I did a bit of upper body work just to kind of keep me sane, basically.
To stay ripped, to stay totally ripped.
Not quite. I'd love it if that was the case, but no, just to at least keep some semblance of being an athlete, yeah.
Right. Anytime I have a guest on, and if I know that they've had an injury or anything like that, I like to talk to them about it, because you are also a case of there is light at the end of the tunnel. You had a stress fracture, you were out for months, you took the time, you took the diligence to take care of the injury in your body, but then you were able to come back, and with a win at Rocky Raccoon, with a win at Rocky Raccoon 100 miler, that is testament to, if you treat your body right and you treat the injury with respect, you can be back on your feet and doing great things.
Exactly. So I think runners tend to get lost in the moment, and they think, oh, I'm injured now, and this is ruining my season, and I'm losing all this fitness. And we do feel guilty that we're not running because we spend such a large amount of our time doing it. But sometimes when you have an injury, the best thing to do is just focus 100% on making yourself better, healing the injury, and getting over it, because firstly, that's the quickest way to get past it. Also, it's a lot mentally healthier to then be thinking of positive things you can do to fix it, rather than constantly focusing on the negative of the fact that you can't run and you can't do the thing you want to do. So instead, I purposely had a little bit of downtime, but then I very much went into doing everything I could to make the injury heal itself, including going on crutches, including using a bone stimulator with ultrasound. Yeah. I'm not sure how much that helped, but at least I felt like I was proactively doing something about it, and I used that for about 3 months again, just to help it maybe get a little bit quicker for that healing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, whatever you did, it worked, and you took the right amount of time, and you're back on your feet. I'm going to kind of feel.
Don't just say it's going to be X amount of time and then run anyway. I was very much aware that I would be cutting it fine to be able to do Rocky Raccoon 100, but if the injury meant that I couldn't do it and that I wouldn't have enough time to train, then I would, instead of getting really annoyed about that and then make myself worse, I would take enough time to get past the injury. Now, 3 months was just about long enough to go from basically no exercise on the legs to doing the 100, but only because I've done this kind of thing for about 10 years, so it was a little bit quicker than it normally would be. But I was prepared to not do Rocky Raccoon 100 if that's what I needed to do.
Got it. And I was going to say, you must have had some pretty amazing base mileage in your system already to be able to turn around from a 3-month hiatus to a 3-month build. And the 10 years of running ultras has obviously been tantamount to making that happen. So.
Well, exactly. I mean, I think that so many of the adaptations from an endurance runner or an athlete of any kind with endurance are very slow, long-term changes. So they don't go away overnight. You know, if you've been running for year in, year out, doing ultras, doing marathons, then even if you have a sustained amount of time being injured or off, it's not like you lose a lot of those deep down adaptations. A lot of that's still going to be in there. It just takes a bit of time to get it back. But it'll always be quicker to come back than it was in the first place, because there's a degree of muscle memory, and some of the things like extra capillaries have been created in the muscles that they're basically ready to be athletic again, which they wouldn't have been if you'd never done that in the past at all.
That's awesome to hear and super helpful. I get questions from people who are injured all the time of how to take care of it, and to kind of hear that is excellent. I'm going to field questions throughout the interview as well for those of you who are watching live. Ask them in the chat room, and I'll be sure to relay them to Ian. This is a great opportunity to talk to him pretty much directly. We've had a couple questions already in the chat room. This is from Bob Matheson. What does Ian think of treadmills?
I actually use treadmills quite a lot. And even though I live in California, and even in wintertime it's very easy to run, I mean, I'm seeing all the bad weather on the East Coast and Canada and stuff, and it's 70 degrees and perfect weather outside for me today. So sorry to rub that into anyone who's not got that. But the point is that even with that good weather, I still make use of treadmills because I think they're very good for two or three different things. Firstly, for doing some speed sessions, because you don't get interruptions of crossing a road or having to dodge pedestrians or whatever it might be, or traffic. Yeah. So I find them good for interval training and tempo runs anyway. I also think they're very good for being able to get in climbing if you're in an area that doesn't have as many hills. So you can get in a sustained climb of however many thousand feet you want if you just set the treadmill to steep and stay on it for a while. And then also just as a way to sometimes come back from injury because it's a softer surface to run on. So I used that a little bit more as soon as I came back from the stress fracture.
Yeah, so it's a good question, and while I've hated treadmills, that's really good advice. I didn't even think about the fact that you could run on it and not have to deal with stoplights, which in LA, being a runner in LA, you do. If you're running on the roads, it sucks.
It's also more interesting if you're going faster because it gives you something to focus on, especially an interval session where the pace keeps changing every few minutes.
Sure.
It makes the time go by quicker than if you're just plodding on the treadmill and then it's just monotonous.
So let's talk a little bit about Rocky Raccoon 100 miler, especially this last one. You've run the race before multiple times. What did you approach this year's race any differently? Did you have any idea that you were going to do as well as you did? Did you have a goal at the start to finish first? How did the race plan out for you?
I was kind of hoping to go after the course record. I got that there 4 years ago. But I knew that I'd have to have a perfect day, be in perfect fitness, and you just never know if that's going to be the case, especially coming back with the shortened build-up. I thought I probably had a chance of doing that, but ultimately it was just trying to do the best possible time I could, whatever that would be. And that ended up being 45 minutes or so slower than the record, and I was perfectly happy with that. I feel like off that training, I really kind of got everything I could out of my body. But in terms of the position, I was thinking instead, if I do my best race, then it doesn't really matter where I am until near the end, like the last 20 miles. And especially since it's made up of 5 20-mile loops, you get a load of out and backs. You get to see where the other competitors are. Right. So I think after the first 20-mile loop, I was in 8th. And there were several guys who started off a lot quicker. One guy in particular, a young guy straight out of college who did like well under course record pace for the first 2 loops. So I was something like half an hour back from him. But I felt like I was going at the appropriate pace, and that if he keeps doing that, then I'll always say this to my clients as well, that don't let someone distract you. If they're going at a pace that is significantly different from what you think you can do based on your training and your level of fitness, etc., then just let them do their thing. You do your best race, and then see how it pans out. And if they manage to hold on to it, shake their hand at the end and go, that was awesome, mind-blowing, well done. But you're probably going to have a worse race if you try and match it. So unfortunately, he dropped out about halfway through the race, and I was glad that I hadn't tried to stick with him, because if I had, I'd have had a horrible last 50 miles that had been a lot of walking and significantly slower. But then there were several guys still ahead of me at that point. It was the US ATF 100-mile championship, so there were a few guys going for that. In particular, a guy from Italy who, not going for the championship, but he was just a fast runner who'd won a load of 100-milers in various European countries. And I think he was 4th in the Spartathlon, a big race in Greece last year. Mm-hmm. And he was winning it for a large part of the race after that first guy dropped out. But again, I just thought if I stick to my plan and do a good last 30 or so miles, that's the part of the race that matters. And I think in any ultra, it's the last third of the race that's most important. And if you can run well there, you're going to have a good race. And if other people can go quicker, then basically they're doing a better race than you, or they're fitter than you, or whatever. But I thought if I do that last bit well and he stays ahead of me, well done to him. If I do it well and I pass him, then I'll feel vindicated that I was really sticking to my plan well. And luckily that worked. So at about mile 85, I passed him, and then he slowed down a bit more on the last loop, and luckily I managed to hold on to the win there.
It was really amazing to follow from afar. I mean, you really only get a certain number of updates via Twitter or Ultrasports Live or the live broadcast and stuff like that. But it was really, really awesome to follow the whole race. So congratulations, Ian. It was an
Thank you.
incredible performance. Now I know that you have a number of other races that are coming up this season. I want to talk about kind of things that maybe you're looking forward to in the year and in the years beyond here in a little bit. But with the Georgia Death Race happening next month, which I've heard incredible stories from, and that it's really nasty, super technical, really tough. It's a 68-mile race that you're signed up for, as well as Lake Sonoma. And then the Western States training camp. Are you building up to a possible Western States appearance again, or?
Oh yeah, Western States is the main focus for the summer. I've been there the last 5 years.
Yeah.
I have become a little bit obsessed by it. I currently live about 2 hours away from the finish line. I live close to it partly because of the convenience of getting to and from the race and having similar conditions. So, I mean, I live somewhere that fits in with my wife as well because she needs to commute into San Francisco. But
Sure.
from where I live on the edge of the Bay Area, I'm right next to a mountain that has very similar conditions to the Western States course and about a 3,500 foot climb. So Mount Diablo is the reason that I live exactly where I do, and that's because of Western States. So I am a little bit obsessed with that race. So I'm going to keep going back almost as many times as I can, I think. And that's the main focus for the summer, without a doubt. But the other races are certainly to help build up. I really want to give Lake Sonoma a good chance because, again, it's a fairly local race for me here. It's only about an hour away.
Yeah,
and it is hyper competitive. I mean, that's one of the big races to do in the US. It was so fast last year with the top 3 guys being within about a minute of each other, and 2 of them end up being second or first and third in the Ultrarunner of the Year. Just great race, great location, etc. I'm not actually going to be running Georgia Death Race anymore because I realized that I wasn't quite as fit as I hoped at Rocky Raccoon. But it is part of the US Skyrunner series, so I'm still involved with that and with the whole series itself. So that's the first race that kicks it all off. That was one of the reasons I wanted to be there. Instead, I'm going to have to skip that, unfortunately, and just try and promote it from afar. But yeah, I mean, it's even harder than it was last year. So last year, I think it was 60 miles and 15,000 feet of climbing.
Yeah.
Now it's 68 and 20,000 feet of climbing. So it's a hardcore race. And there's going to be some good competition there. I've seen the entrance list, and there's several super fast guys who are going to really hammer it out there and do what look like slow times for that kind of distance. But that's because it's gnarly and loads of climbing as well.
Oh, it's nasty. I mean, I like to surround myself with the guys that like the technical terrain. You know, Gary Robbins and James Varner and stuff like that. They're incredible athletes, but even they are like, oh, the Georgia Death Race. Yeah, it's a dream race, but it's nasty. Oh, it's nasty.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, it's going to be a tough race, and that's the aim of all the skyrunning races. Is that they're not that they're meant to be nasty, but they're meant to be tough and technical, as well as having exotic, beautiful locations. And so most of them tend to be slightly higher altitude, but the stuff on the East Coast, given there isn't as much altitude to deal with there, they tend to be a little bit lower down, but still in beautiful mountain areas and huge amounts of climbing. Really good test for runners and people who are stronger on the really steep stuff in particular.
So let's actually dovetail right on into the U.S. skyrunning stuff because this is awesome. Last year when I heard the announcement for the U.S. skyrunning series and all the races that were debuting, it was really exciting because as a big fan of the sport, you watch these European races and you watch the amazing elite athletes run up the sides of these mountains and these ridges and do these incredible things and really tough courses. You just haven't seen those type of races in the States. Did they approach you? Did you approach them? How did it work to bring U.S. skyrunning to the forefront? And like, what is your criteria for picking the races, and kind of what is the story behind bringing skyrunning?
Sure, I mean, I've been involved with it since 2012. When they first launched Ultras within the Skyrunner World Series, they invited a load of athletes over to the Transvolcania Ultra in La Palma in the Canary Islands off Africa. And so I got to meet them there, and I said, hey, I want to be involved in this stuff. It's amazing. So from that point on, I became a member of the board of the International Skyrunning Federation. Yeah. And because of that, they were wanting to expand to have not just a World Series, but also have series in multiple different countries. And I think this year there's something like 15 or more of these, and it's just growing year by year. And so for the US one, they asked me if I'd be the one to organize it. And then I'm not a race director, but luckily I know a lot of race directors, so that's the more important thing. And it's really about getting other people to create the races within the correct kind of style, and then I put them all together in the series. So some of them were existing races, like you mentioned James Varner, Rain Shadow Running, there's Angel Staircase in Washington State. Things like the Georgia Death Race already existed, but now it's a slightly more hardcore version. And then there's some completely new races in there as well. Really, even things like the Rut, for example, really famous now because of how competitive it was last year. That's only been around for 2 years. And so that's been part of Skyrunning on the world stage as well as the US stage since US series stage since last year. So there's some really fantastic races, and I think the Rut's probably the best example of what we're looking to try and do. So European races tend to be pretty big. They tend to go off-piste. And that's harder to do in the US, so we try and do things ideally on private land, because then it's easier to get permits basically to go up the side of the mountain rather than to have to stick on switchbacks. But to some degree we have to use the switchbacks in most of these locations. But the Rut, it's a private ski resort at Big Sky in Montana, so it's the ideal place to be able to really do a kind of crazy, insane course. It goes up to 11,000 feet, beautiful views. I was there last year to help, again, with promotion. And it's exactly the type of thing we're looking for. It had that European feel to it. They even had cowbells out with the spectators. So really, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get that kind of European feel for races over here. It's not like there haven't been any races like this before. And I would say that certain things like hard rock in particular are very much that style of race. A little bit smaller and lower key, but it's the same style of running where it's high alpine, beautiful. It's all about the love of the mountains rather than anything to do with just making a massive event for the sake of it. I'd love to have had hard rock in skyrunning, but unfortunately they're not interested in that kind of thing. I mean, it's difficult enough just to get into it for anyone, never mind to then have elites being able to get in and have more than the 100 or so people who do the race. But that is the kind of event that really has been around already and that we want to get a little bit more of, and also make it more accessible to people so that more than just a few people who have a 2% chance in a lottery can get in.
Yeah. Now, I know I have a lot of race directors that watch the show or are familiar with it. I mean, is there a certain criteria that you're looking for in a race if someone were to come up with something in their local terrain, besides being private, but needs to have a certain amount of elevation gain or maintain a certain elevation?
There's basically 3 different disciplines within skyrunning. So we've got the vertical K, and that can be at any altitude, but it's basically 1,000 meters, which is about 3,200 feet of climbing within a 5K. So you're just going straight up the side of a mountain typically. And you've got these in loads of iconic locations like Chamonix. They have one up the side of, I think, Brevant. Really, really cool races and super hardcore. But it's very short. So when we think of trail running and mountain running, we tend to think of ultras more, but this is obviously the other end of the scale. So as well as the VK, we have sky distances, which are anywhere between about a half marathon and a marathon. And they have to have a minimum of 2,000 meters of climbing, which is about 6,500, 6,600 feet of vertical at a minimum. We generally have more than that for most of the races.
Right.
And they're usually also held at altitudes above 2,000 meters, so above 6,000 or so feet. And then ultras are basically like the sky races, but they're just ultra distance and beyond. So typically speaking, for an ultra, it'll need to be reasonably high altitude. It'll need to have huge amounts of climbing. So, for example, the Rut has something like 10 or 11,000 feet of climbing in a 50K. So huge amounts of that, where it's really steep. And also we want rugged terrain. So that's where it can be a little bit more difficult if there are areas that can't get permits for going off a very smooth path. But also that's something that the East Coast does a lot better typically than the West Coast, because a lot of our West Coast trails are very buffed out. East Coast is a lot more rugged, and so they already have that almost everywhere, and they can get permitted on it as well.
That's super exciting. Now, are you open to adding races? Is it something that you hope will grow in the years to come, or is it a set number of races every year so you can have a series?
I mean, within the concept of it being a series, we can't have too many, because we really need to kind of have 3 of each discipline, of each distance category that people can score from. So if we have 20 races in a category, and then you say that 3 of them score, then you could have 2 people who win 3 races, and they get maximum points, and they have never even raced each other. So you don't really have a team, or you don't really have a competition between them in the same way. I would say we'll probably be limiting to about 10 at the most, and we may even at some point have an East Coast division and a West Coast division, depending on the availability of races. But we're certainly aiming to have a few more over coming years, and I'm open to any race director who has something that fits in with the description I've just given you, I'm always open to that.
Do you have to run the race before you allow it into the skyrunning series? Like, do you, Ian Sharman, have to go out there and run it and go, oh, this is awesome, or this is...
No, unfortunately, there's not enough budget for me to fly around and just play on courses the whole time. I'd love to do that, because that would be the ideal way to check it out. But also, some of these courses you can only really run on for 2 or 3 months a year because of the fact they're in the mountains. Right. So really, I have to kind of get a sense of who the race directors are. Usually, as I said, it's people I already know. So several of them I got people I knew already did races and were really into the mountain running culture, and asked them to create something. So the perfect example of that is the Flagstaff Sky Races, which are the finale of the entire series, where the Curry brothers and RR100, they're based out of Arizona, and I know them well. Excellent race directors, and those guys are at Hard Rock every year. They do a load of races in Silverton in Colorado as well. So exactly the right kind of people with the right kind of outlook on it. And I just said, hey, can you create something for this? Yep. And they had a race at Flagstaff that wasn't really a skyrunning type of event, but they said, yeah, this is a location where we can make it a lot more hardcore, go up the side of the mountains and really make it something epic. And so that's what they did for last year and ongoing.
Yeah, we had Jamil actually on the show right before that race. We talked about it. I think we even gave a free entryway on the show. The Curry brothers are amazing, and their races are amazing. I can't wait to get out there and actually run one, finally, for once. And yeah, Jamil, I believe, will be at Hard Rock again this year, as well as Barclays. I think he's got a pretty nasty schedule ahead of him for the rest of the year. But
yeah, that's exactly the right kind of people I'm trying to get involved with. I mean, it's really fun from my perspective, because these are people who are friends and who I have a lot of respect for what they're doing. And I can, I'm really getting a chance to just allow them to create something. Even, they generally want to do crazy races, but they've got to be able to get people who are going to turn up as well. So the skyrunning brand kind of brings a bit more attention to some of these races for them and makes them a bit more viable for them.
Now, in the chat room, we have a question from Randy. Do you ever do any shorter races in the Bay Area, such as Dipsea, Lake Chabot Trail Challenge, Skyline 50, or do you only do longer distances?
I do a lot of 50Ks. So I think I've probably in total done 10, 15 50Ks in the Bay Area. I do loads of road marathons and quite a few half marathons, particularly on the road. So I've done San Francisco Marathon 3 times, Boston 4 times, London 3 times. Basically, I've done a lot of road marathons. I like them a lot, even though it's a totally opposite end of what we were just talking about with the skyrunning. I'm just not very good at the short stuff, frankly. I mean, like if I turn up to a local 5K, I feel like I'm going backwards. While if I turn up to the long races, it's a bit more of a relaxed pace and seems to be what my body's a bit better suited to. But no, I love doing all the races around the Bay Area. There's so many to choose from, both the road and the trail. And so I think my next race, given I won't be doing the Georgia Death Race, is going to be the Oakland Marathon. So it's a road marathon. It's all about speed, and I find that marathon training really helps with ultras anyway. It keeps you a little bit sharper, allows you to run the cruising sections of ultras a little bit more efficiently.
I agree. Being able to dip a couple marathons in throughout the course of the year is, people are like, you're crazy if you just do trail running, stick with trail running. Or if you stick with road, stick with road. But I love being able to kind of do a little bit of both. I think one helps the other, and vice versa. And it's
I think there's a lot of benefit for whether you're focusing on one or the other to still include the opposite. And again, this is where when I brought Ellie into the coaching side of things, she and I have a very similar philosophy. The reason I've known her for so long is because we turn up at the same races again and again, whether it's a road race or a trail or a mountain race. Yeah. So it's the same philosophy where the road stuff helps with just making you a faster runner, helps with pacing and things like that, and then the trails help you with a bit more strength and less chance of getting injured as well, because it's a bit more varied. So it's good to be good at both of them. Ellie's just as good as you can be pretty much at both. I mean, she even wins road marathons on top of that as well, while I only get to do that if it's some local town thing with like 10 people, but she wins proper ones.
Have you ever traveled up to North Vancouver and run some of the trails up there with her at all?
I haven't. No, I've been to Vancouver once, but it was before
it's worth it.
Yeah, no, I very much want to go there, and there's a load of other people. I mean, there's so many towns around North America where there's a big trail running scene. Vancouver is one of them. Bay Area is another. LA, there's a place like Boulder, places in Montana, etc. But the one that most interests me is the one I'm going to move back to. I used to live in Oregon. I'll be moving back to Bend in Oregon again, in Central Oregon. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. And there's so many top-level runners there. There's Olympians. There's people like Max King, Steph Howe. super fast communities, and it's just fun to be able to go on runs with your friends who just happen to be awesome, world-class runners on top of that as well.
Yeah, my goal was to actually make a film up in Bend, because it's not a hidden gem. There's a lot of people that know about it, but having people like Max King and Steph Howe and there's some good companies there that are doing really good products and stuff. I'm really excited to get up to Bend. That's awesome that you're moving there. That's great. From the chat room, from Patrick Floyd, I am training for my first marathon. Looking back at your first marathon, how smooth did training go, and how did you effectively work up to an ultra or regular marathon distance? This is a pretty basic question, but I know that you...
Yeah, I mean, I had a friend that I was training with, so this is, again, related to the Marathon des Sables, that I signed up to that with a friend of mine. We did a few races in the build-up together. He used to be a really fast runner when he was at university, but then he stopped for a few years, so he was actually coming from a much more experienced background of it than I was. But we basically did races where we ran together for the first 2 or 3 of them. And so we did a half marathon, then a marathon a couple of months later, and I think my first one was Prague. So pretty cool place to go for your first one in Czech Republic.
Oh, yeah.
And then because I knew I'd have to do this thing with multiple days of racing, I actually signed up to my second marathon 2 weeks after the first one. So I had Prague and then Stockholm 2 weeks later. And I was actually surprised that, because, you know, if you've never done it before, you assume this is the kind of thing that then wipes you out for about a month, and you limp and you've got a million blisters, and it wasn't actually as bad as I expected, but then it makes sense that I did eventually transition to ultras, because the marathons, it's not like they're easy, and it certainly isn't easy if you push hard, but because I was doing it with a friend and we didn't have a time goal and we were just taking it a more relaxed effort, we actually had a pretty good build-up. But the one thing I would point out is that in the build-up to that, the first time we ran 13 miles, I couldn't believe it was possible to go longer than that. My knees ached, my hips ached, every possible part of me, joints, muscles, whatever, ached. And I just thought that it was crazy, the idea of even doing a marathon. And that was probably about 2 months before I actually did that first marathon. And then even in that small amount of time, the marathon felt relatively okay. So it just amazes me how good the human body is at adapting to things and what it's capable of. And I think that's one of the biggest things I take away from running, is that our bodies are capable of doing insane things. You see it every time you go to any ultra. People going through huge challenges and doing things that on paper most people don't think are possible. And that's also one of the hugely inspiring parts of
it. That's excellent advice. And this next question from a live viewer as well is going to dovetail, I think, into what I want to talk to Ian about, and that's coaching. Brittany Pleasant asks, which is harder, not meeting a personal goal, or as a coach, seeing a client not meet their personal goal?
That's a difficult one. Yeah, I mean, obviously sorry, my dog's now trying to jump into the sea. He wants to just pop up there. This is the other one. So I would say it's very, very rewarding when I get any client who gets one of their goals, especially since there's only so many goals I can possibly hit in my life anyway. So there's only one time I can do my first marathon. There's only one time I can do my first 100-miler. So I get other people going through that the whole time, which is just amazing. And it's those same feelings of them not realizing what they could do before it. And occasionally when things don't go right, or, you know, worst case scenario, I had one guy recently who the day before the race, he got a stomach bug. And so on the morning of the race, he wasn't even able to get out of bed, and he was just lying in it the whole day long, having traveled from another continent to get to a race. So just really bad luck. And I feel so bad for him there, because he's put in all this work for months and months. But then it's like I would do with myself, is you refocus to another goal. So I said to him, okay, so what other races can we do in the short term to take advantage of that fitness? Because it was just bad luck that you got ill that day. So let's see what we can do to still have that build-up pay off with something that feels really good.
Yeah, that's great. So let's actually talk about coaching. Do you have a certain philosophy that you attribute to your coaching style that kind of differs your style from other coaches? Do you take on athletes of all levels? Is there something that you're looking for? Are you open to new clients? Let's talk a bit about.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say there's a philosophy behind my coaching business, Sharman Ultra. So I've got both Ellie Greenwood and Liza Howard who work within that, and we definitely have a way of looking at things where, sorry, the aim is really to be very flexible. I think it's almost useless to have, say, a 6-month plan taken off the internet or out of a book that says this is how you train for a marathon or an ultra or whatever it is, because you've got to factor in all the little elements of someone's history, what their body has been through in the past, what their daily life is like, if they get injured or ill, if they have travel, if family things come up, if they get a busy week at work, all of these things that have to be allowed for. So rather than thinking of things in a slightly more traditional way where you've got cycles and you build up and you pretend everything's going to be perfect as if you're an Olympic athlete and you've got all your time to dedicate to the training, it's a little bit more trying to plan around the realities of life, basically. So often with a lot of my runners, that means going from having an idea of what the big goals are and being able to build up to that and always having an idea of the big picture. But we only really think about 2 or 3 weeks out for the specific sessions that we're working on. And even those get changed depending on how they feel, how their body's recovering, if they start to feel like they're getting an injury, if they get ill, all of these different things. So I just think it's kind of pointless to think of the perfect world when that just doesn't apply to anyone, really.
Yeah. Now, do
and
you?
Yes, I am taking people on of all abilities. So most people I help have done at least a half marathon. Most of them have at least done a little bit of marathoning or ultras, and they're usually building up to something more. But it really depends. I've got some people like Ellie who are best in the world. Other people who are either trying to do their first race at a given distance, or they're just trying to get a PR, or to try and get a 24-hour buckle, or all these different kind of targets. So really, it's the whole spectrum of runners.
That's excellent, and anyone that's watching live, I absolutely recommend that you reach out to Ian because he's one of the best. His whole team is elite level and some of the best coaches around. Do you? This is a philosophy that I've heard from multiple coaches, as far as, or even watching elites or following elites on Strava and seeing that they're training and they're build up to certain races or certain events or PRs. Weekly mileage. So there are guys and girls out there that try to reach that 100 to 150 miles per week, sometimes more than that for peak for these bigger races. Are you the type of coach that does feel runners should peak over 100 miles per week, or do you not?
Not at all. I think that there's no benefit in picking around a number like that. What's to say that 100 is better than 87? It's just a round number. I know what works typically for me within my training, but I don't try and imply that that's going to be the optimum for someone else. I'm not a big mileage runner. I mean, I'd say to build up to 100 mile, I'd average for 6 months 70 miles a week, maybe have a couple of weeks that are over 100. But the most important thing is quality over quantity.
Yeah.
And I think that virtually every runner is going to benefit from having a focus to every run they do, rather than just trying to get in as much running as possible. There are some times when that will help, particularly people who maybe don't have as much motivation. Then it can be good to do things like streaking, so they just have a reason to always fit their run in, particularly the kind of people who might miss a lot of runs typically, or they're struggling to fit it in because they're very, very busy. And so if they don't have something like that to keep them honest, sometimes they find that they just don't even run during the week, and then it's just all about the weekend. So I don't think there's any kind of magic number. I see really top-level runners who do obscene amounts of mileage, really top-level runners who don't. I mean, a few examples would be Hal Kerner, Karl Meltzer, Dave Mackey. They don't do big mileage, but these are some of the best runners out there who've really achieved huge things. So I don't think it's necessary to do more, but all things being equal, as long as you can avoid getting injured and you can keep the quality of the sessions and the variety of them in there, it helps do a little bit more running. But you're going to get more benefit going from 40 to 50 miles a week than from 140 to 150.
Yeah, and actually what I think is interesting about the point you just brought up is guys like Hal Mackey, who may not be doing these huge mile weeks, they've been running ultras for a very long time.
The longevity there, exactly.
The longevity is awesome. And someone who's very early in their ultra running phase, at least I hope I am, I plan on running ultras for as long as humanly possible. So as I'm training for my first 100 this year, and I'm probably going to have to bring you on, Ian, as a coach, just because I'm going to need to get an idea of what the fuck I'm going to be in for the next 6 months or so. I was really worried about having to reach these high mileage per week goals.
No, I think people get daunted by it. Typically, you'll see world-class marathoners are doing 140, 150 miles a week. They do very high mileage at a very fast pace.
Yeah.
But also you've got to bear in mind not just the amount of miles, but also the time on your feet. If you're running more for a mountain ultra and you're doing a lot more vertical in your training, and also if you're going at a slower pace than those guys, you're basically doing much more. To do 150 miles a week for yourself compared to a Kenyan marathoner, you'd be doing a lot more time on your feet, which means less recovery time, etc. And there's no need for a 100-miler to do 100 miles a week. I think it can be good sometimes to have some weeks that are a bit bigger, and it's certainly good for the mental side of it sometimes to do a slightly higher mileage, or as a test, for example. But I don't think physically you need to do really high mileage. I think what's more important is having long, consistent periods of being uninjured and consistent with the training, and being able to have variety in there, and also focusing on the specifics of the race that you're doing. So if it's a high-altitude mountain race, then trying to work on whatever you can to do with similarities to that, especially in the final few months of the build-up. Although things like altitude, that's about the hardest one to be able to train for. But let's say it's Western states with the heat, to have heat training in there, and hills, and in particular downhills for Western states. But it's all about having the specifics of the race and having smart training rather than just doing as much as you can. Too often that just leads to getting injured if people just focus on mileage targets rather than how their body's feeling, how their body is responding to training.
Excellent advice, and I know a lot of my live viewers are going to love that. There's a person in the chat room that is apparently yelling because he wants his questions answered. It's all capitals. This Thad is asking, what is your diet like, Ian? What is your diet?
Again, I try not to be too precise with things. I think that there's certain elements of life where... Sorry, again, you can keep hearing the dogs shaking it out. Stop it.
Casey Lichtig's in the chat room. She loves your puppies.
Okay. So what was the question again? They distracted me there.
Your diet. Diet,
yeah. I tend to just try and be generally healthy. I think the core principles are that you don't need to have any kind of fad diet. I don't believe it has to be paleo. I don't believe it has to be low carb or whatever it might be. I'm not convinced that, say, the fat-adapted paleo-type diet is the only answer or the perfect answer. I think that, generally speaking, unless there's particular issues that you have with certain foods and being allergic to them or intolerant to them, generally speaking, I think it's best to just have a varied diet without too much processed stuff, with lots of fresh food and fruits and vegetables and variety, and just to enjoy food. I think it's one of the things in life that as a runner, it's important to not be too anal about these things and try and get some fun out of the food. And I love food. That's one of the biggest perks, I think, of being a runner. And certainly after a big race, I'm happy to let myself indulge a little bit. I think I put on about 15 pounds when I was injured. And for a while I thought, okay, I can just allow myself to lose it a little bit, because then as soon as I start training, it'll go back to normal. But also beer is another part of that. I don't think beer helps me be a better runner, but it helps me be a more relaxed runner. And actually looking back to the Grand Slam, where there were very short periods between each of the 100-milers, between 3 and 4 weeks, I think having a few beers in between actually really helped just to kind of relax, because it's very stressful doing really hard efforts of running very close together. So in some ways, I think even though physically it wasn't the best thing for my liver, for example, to have a lot of beer, it sometimes helped just to be able to chill out and mentally reset. So I generally think food and drink, try and be generally healthy. We know what the principles are. There doesn't need to be anything weird in there, and trying to avoid processed stuff, but to enjoy it. And also moderation, of course, not to just eat loads and loads and loads, even if it's healthy stuff.
Right. I'm liking Ian's perspective here. This is really, really helpful.
It's worked for people for a long, long time. There's no need, I think, to go with any kind of new fad. There's no massive differences. But things that generally weren't in our diet for a long period of time and that are very processed and fake, we're not going to react to those as well. I think other than that principle, I don't think there's much of a need to be too overly kind of annoying about the diet that you eat, and rather just eat food that you like.
Love it. We are going to be approaching the end of the show here. I'm going to keep Ian around for a little bit in the post-show, so those of you who've been asking questions in the chat room, re-ask them. We'll just kind of rapid-fire through them. Before we let him go, I have to thank him for dropping by. Before we move into the post-show, I'm going to rapid-fire questions at him in the Quickie Question Quiz, which is something that I do with all of my guests, Ian. Basically, I have a list of like 6 questions, and I just ask you answer as quickly as you can. Let me know if you're ready, and I'll just start firing them off.
Go for it, yeah.
What was your very first race?
The Reading Half Marathon near London.
What's your favorite running movie?
Good question. I suppose I like those. There's a couple of Prefontaine ones that were pretty good. I can't remember the names of them now.
Trails or road?
Both. I get really bored if I only stuck to one.
Favorite place to run?
Again, I'd probably say Bend, because it's right on the mountains, the Cascade Mountains, so I love running around there, and it's just spectacular.
What is your favorite post-race indulgence?
Straight after a race, I have no desire to eat or drink things, but certainly a couple of days later, I would say probably beer, just to be able to relax and feel like I've earned it.
Do you have a favorite beer currently? I know it can change pretty quickly.
Yeah, there's again a brewery in Bend in particular, a place called Crux Fermentation Project, and they've got a Belgian beer called Double Cross that is delicious.
Crux is amazing. I was hoping you weren't going to say 10 Barrel because I know they just got bought out. I love them, but they just got bought out. And what are your current running kicks?
I'm mainly wearing the Ultra Lone Peak, so I started working with Ultra this year and used the Lone Peak 2.0 in the 100 mile, and I think that's probably going to be like 90% of my mileage at the moment because it's perfect for the road and the trail.
Yeah, just reviewed them. They're really, really good shoe. And finally, who is your favorite ginger online running guru podcaster?
I think that's got to be you.
That's excellent. Correct answer. It is the correct answer. So again, Ian, I have to thank you very much for jumping in here and answering questions and talking to us about the coaching and the running and the racing and everything, your perspective. We are going to keep him around for just a little bit in the post show, so if you have any more questions for Ian, ask him in the chat room. I know Casey had one in there. I want to talk to him about his schedule on the upcoming year and races that he has that coming up that maybe he's looking forward to, maybe even beyond this year. Before we let him go, Ian, where can people find you? This is the most important thing. Where can people find you on social media, websites, coaching? Where can they contact you?
Sure. I mean, basically, if you Google Sharman Ian, most of my stuff is at Sharmanian, or that's most of it. My website for coaching is sharmanultra.com. But if you look up Ian Sharman, you'll find any of the stuff you're looking for.
Excellent. So stick around for the post show, everybody. Once again, Ethan Newberry, the Ginger Runner. This is Ginger Runner Live, episode number 53. Very excited that we are at this point in the number of episodes. It's really exciting. You can follow me on all the social networks. Over on Twitter, it's at the Ginger Runner. On Facebook, it's the Ginger Runner. On Instagram, it's at Ethan Newberry. And subscribe to this channel and like this episode and share it because this is a really informative one. I'm really, really stoked with it because Ian is just super knowledgeable, very experienced ultra runner, and just runner in general of all distances. So we got to pick his brain a little bit, and we're going to do a little bit more in the post show. So stick around. Thanks for watching live. See you in the post show. Yes, excellent, Ian. Oh man, thank you so much. I honestly just asked questions. You bet. So I'm just going to kind of go through some of the questions that popped up in the chat room. Some from early on, and then some that are coming in right now. So we had one from Jared Foster. Says, "What do you recommend as your longest run?" We kind of touched a little bit on this, but what do you recommend as your longest run leading up to a 100-miler? And what should your weekly mileage be? I know you kind of touched on it, but maybe a long run. I think it depends
on your history. So basically, for myself, I'm happy to go into a 100-miler with nothing more than a 50K under my belt in the 6 months before. I think for someone who's maybe doing their first 100-miler, it helps to do at least a 50-miler in the build, maybe 100K. But it's not so much for the physical side of it. It's more so they can learn from what they'll be dealing with later in the race, and also to just get a confidence boost that they've done a longer run. So I don't think there's a particular mileage you have to hit, but I wouldn't recommend going into a 100-miler if you've not been doing kind of 30, 40 miles a week at an absolute minimum for quite a long while. But for that longest run, I would say regular 50Ks, they're a great training distance, and maybe a 50-miler or 100K.
Go-to methods for recovering from a knee injury? I know that this can be very specific to that individual, but is there any advice?
Depends on what kind of knee injury it is. I mean, say that the first method is go to an expert and find out what the problem is so that they can work out if you need to have rest, if there's exercises you need, if there's surgery or anything like that. But basically, if you're injured for more than about a week with something that just isn't going away with a little bit of rest, I always suggest going to see physiotherapist, sports medicine doctor, or someone who's going to be a medical professional who can properly examine it.
This one's from Adam Baldwin. Ian, how often do you just have a bad run? How do you bounce back when training isn't going as expected?
I would say maybe about 1 in 10 runs are bad, maybe more than that sometimes. So I think it's important to remember that no matter who you are or how good you are, even like a Kenyan Olympic marathoner is going to have crappy runs. And it doesn't mean that they're a bad runner or that they've lost their fitness. It's just to think of the overall training. So if in the last couple of weeks you had one run that was bad and the rest were good, or the next one is good, then just brush it off and say, yep, sometimes you get some bad runs. Could be factors specific to that day. The main thing is that when you're doing a race, you're trying to minimize the chance of that being a bad run by having a taper, by having more sleep, by having a better build-up. But it can just happen sometimes. Maybe you're a bit more stressed at work or have been traveling or picked up a cold or anything like that. So I generally say think of the overall training recently rather than just any one run to judge how you're feeling.
Do you believe in long runs with a recovery backup or double long runs on weekends for a build-up?
Both. I mean, I find that back-to-back long runs are a really effective way of getting in better endurance. And again, you can focus more on quality than just quantity. If you do 2 25-mile runs instead of 1 50-mile run, you can keep up a higher pace. You can be recovering from it quicker. You don't have to taper for it in the same way, and less chance of getting injured. So it's good to have back-to-backs, but it's also good to just have your standard long run most weekends, I would say, when you're in the build-up, but also to have some weeks where you do take it a little bit easier and allow your body to rest and recover and absorb all of the training you've been doing.
This is from Phil LaCroix, and it was a question that was asked much earlier, and then he reiterated later, so I'm glad he asked it. Thanks, Phil. Race day nutrition question. How can one figure out an ideal calorie per hour amount?
I don't think there is an ideal number. I think it does vary from person to person, and this is one of the issues, particularly in 100-milers, and particularly if you have altitude or heat or other things that really upset the stomach. Some people can get away with having very little in these races. Others need to have huge amounts. I mean, I hear about Killian just having a few nuts and berries as he runs around the mountains all day long.
I know, right? That's crazy.
I find that I'm trying to eat constantly. I definitely think of a 100-miler as an eating competition. But that's because my stomach can take it, and so I find that keeps my energy levels up. So I would say just on the long runs, and particularly in long races and the build-up to a target race, to just see what your body's able to absorb. I also believe that the more you try and force it to eat and digest during long runs, like the muscles get trained up, I'm pretty sure the stomach kind of learns from it as well and gets more efficient at being able to absorb food.
I just had one here. Well, I'll move on to the other one. Casey Lichtig asked earlier, what are your racing schedule plans for the rest of the year? And I mean, do you have any races that you're looking forward to run or that are on your bucket list in future years?
Yeah, I mean, this year I'm actually keeping it a little bit more to similar races that I've already done. So I did Rocky Raccoon again, I'm doing Leadville again, I'm doing Western States again. I'm doing some more of the skyrunning stuff, and even if it's just sometimes going out to those races, that's going to be really fun. And that's one of the benefits of being involved in it, that I can see these events and kind of, it's like create your dream race and then go and run it. I mean, there's an element of that as well.
Right.
This year's mainly, actually, it's going to be exclusively in the US. I think this is the first year, this is possibly the first year since I was about 5 that I'll have been in only one country the entire year. But I've always raced a lot around the world, and this year, because of the skyrunning and because I'm moving house, I thought I'd just keep it a little bit easier. And also, restricting myself to the US is not a small area. So there's a lot of different variety of types of event I can do. But it's mainly going to be about, so Rocky Raccoon I've already done, Lake Sonoma, Western States, Leadville, and enjoying some of the skyrunning stuff.
Have you ever had a really terrible race experience, and what was it like?
That first Marathon des Sables, where I was vomiting and all these other things going wrong, and feeling absolutely horrible, feeling very sorry for myself, couldn't sleep in the middle of the night. That was pretty nasty. I would actually say that my hardest race, though, and this is going to sound pathetic, but it's true, is before I did the Grand Slam in 2013, about 6 months before that, I did a 24-hour race called Across the Years in Arizona. It's a Viper Curry Brothers race again. And I went into it with a little bit of a knee injury that I didn't realize, and foot injury. And so it was 24 hours, but I knew that because I was doing the Grand Slam and that I'd probably have at least one of them feel bad, that I was just going to do the full 24 hours no matter what. So I ran for about 30 miles, then did a little bit of run jog for another 10, and then I walked for 70 miles. And it was miserable, and I felt injured, and it was the least enjoyable experience of my life. Closest I've ever come to tears in a race, and I just chose to grind it out because I thought, if I'm 3 races into the Grand Slam and the whole summit is based on doing these 4, you don't get any credit for doing 2 of them or 3 or anything like that. I have to finish it even if I have the worst day possible, unless I'm going to hospital. So I thought, unless I'm going to hospital for this 24-hour race, I'm getting round it. So that was miserable and very painful, and it took me several weeks to kind of get over the mental effort it took just to not give up there.
This question has been asked 37 times in the chat room, so I thought I would ask it. This is from Jack. Hi, I'm 19 years old. I'll be running my first ultra in August, 37 miles. Just wondering how I should change my race day mentality stepping up from the marathon distance.
Mainly the fact that you're going to probably have to do some hiking. That's definitely a big change, and that it's okay to go slower. It's okay to not blast through an aid station as if it's a marathon where you're just grabbing it and spending 1 second there. So I think that that's the main difference. It's that you've got to be thinking about looking after yourself through the race, while in a marathon it's just about trying to keep an even pace.
That's excellent. How much tapering do you allot for a 50-miler and 100-milers? I know I've heard 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I always do 3 weeks is usually when I start my taper. What do you do, Ian?
I now think that for me personally, about 2 weeks of pretty hard tapering plus the week before that of just starting to taper works, and therefore I'll do some speed in that. A taper does not mean that you just do slow running. It basically means that you're pulling back on your volume, but you still have a degree of speed. So if your standard tempo run was 10 miles before, in the taper it might be 6 miles. So you're still doing intensity and keeping the body and the legs kind of sharp, but they're not going to get as fatigued because obviously if they're capable of doing 10 comfortably at the 6 mile mark, they're not going to feel nearly as worn down. So I find that that's really effective to have about 2 weeks, but it varies so much. I know some people who, if they taper for more than a couple of days, they sometimes do worse, and I think it's more mental than physical. And I know other people who really need at least a 3 to 4 week wind down, otherwise they're not quite raring to go. And I think that's even more important for people at the very top level, particularly marathoners, etc., who, 1 or 2 seconds is the difference between them earning $100,000 or $10,000.
Love it. Before I let you go, we're just a little bit over 7 o'clock, and I know I promised to let you go right on time. Where can people find you online, and where can people reach you via email? Even on Strava, I think people can follow you on Strava as well.
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you Google Ian Sharman and whatever you're interested in, whether it's Twitter, that's Sharman Ian. Facebook is Ian Sharman or Sharman Ian, one of those. My coaching website is sharmanultra.com. But basically, whatever you're looking for, Strava, whatever, just put in my name and it should pop up. Either me or some goateed guy in England, I think, who makes comics. That's the two ones that are likely to pop up.
Thanks again, man. I really appreciate you taking the time out tonight to join us all. And the people that are watching are freaking out. They loved all of your information. You're super informative. You're very experienced, knowledgeable. Thank you for dropping the knowledge on the viewers. Very, very awesome.
Glad I could help. And I love talking about running. That's why I do it as a job, coaching people. I literally spend all day doing this. It's great.
And that's why I love talking to people like you who also love it that much. So it's excellent. It's helpful to everyone that watches live.
No, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Of course, man. Anytime. And I'll definitely bring you back on because I feel like I'm going to be doing some more coaching episodes and stuff, and you're going to be my go-to. So those of you who are watching live, thank you so much again for sticking around for the post show. Every single Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we will be doing Ginger Runner Live. Next week will be at number 54. The dogs are barking, which means they need to go outside. You guys are excellent for watching. I appreciate it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow across the social networks, both Ian and myself, and we'll see you guys next week. That is it. Have a good night.